At the time of the battle, it's called the College Church because most of the professors from the Lutheran Theological Seminary are worshiping here. And this church has changed little from today as it looked back then. See, this is a picture from the 1880s. You see the railing steps. Well, obviously, whenever there was a battle, any large building, be it a church, a warehouse, a courthouse, these are going to become hospitals. And soldiers are basically said, look for large buildings. Union soldiers are retreating on the afternoon of July 1st, 1863. And what happens is, many of them, as they are coming from the fields, are wounded. And so they begin to congregate on these steps. But the doors are locked. Now across the street, in the house with the blue trim, that's the home of Mary McAllister and her sister Martha Scott. Actually, it's also the home of Hugh Scott, who has the telegraph key, which becomes another interesting perspective because Hugh takes off with the telegraph key so the Confederates don't get it. But at any rate, Mary McAllister from across the street basically looks at soldiers beginning to congregate here on the steps. So she has a key to the church. She comes over and opens the door and invites in the soldiers and the surgeons. And they immediately take over the initial alcove and make it an operating room. Well, the surgeon imposes upon Mary McAllister, we need nurses. Well, I have no training in nursing, and this is what happens to many of the women in Gettysburg. They become nurses not because of training, but because of necessity. So at any rate, Mary McAllister begins to minister to these wounded soldiers. Now, nursing in the 1860s is not an honorable profession for an unmarried woman because of the fact that they are undressing men, taking care of wounds, and so, an unmarried woman, of which Mary McAllister is a 50-ish spinster. So this is against the grain. But she does her duty, and she reaches a point, though, where she says, enough, I can't do this anymore, I want to go home. So she comes out the door, she comes out in the step, and a Union soldier grabs her by the leg. And he holds up his hand, and he says, help me, and she looks, and his fingers are literally hanging by shards of skin. So she says, wait here. So she goes in, gets a surgeon. She said to the surgeon, can you help this man? Yes, ma'am, I guess I can. He takes out a pocket knife, lops off the guy's fingers, and then says, bandage him. So Mary McAllister bandages it, but she wants to go home. Well, at this point, she decides that she's going to go home, but she comes out just in time to witness another incident that takes place here. And that is, there's a Union chaplain who is standing up on the top of the steps. Now, a chaplain is dressed in black, and as a non-combatant, he's allowed to wear a sidearm, a sword, a pistol, maybe both. Well, at this point, the chaplain is standing up there when a group of Confederate soldiers come up the street, and the Confederate yells at the chaplain, take off them sidearms. And the chaplain may have been a little bit argumentative. As a chaplain, I am allowed to. Boom. The gun fires, and the chaplain rolls down the steps in front of Mary McAllister. She yells at the Confederates, you've killed a chaplain! And the Confederates run on up the street, probably thinking they're going to be condemned to hell. But at any rate, we have the plaque over here now that commemorates the chaplain, Horatio Howe, United Pennsylvania. But Mary McAllister, whenever she sees this, she's going home. And so she tries to run across the street, and she gets caught up in a crowd of soldiers. She's carried almost all the way up to the diamond before she's able to make her way across the street. She finally gets back to her house. She gets to her house, she looks at the doorstep, and it's covered with blood. Her immediately thought is, they massacred my family. So she goes in, and fortunately she finds her family is fine, but the house is filled with wounded. And at this point, a Union surgeon says, ma'am, if you get yourself a red flag and hanging out your window, your hospital will be honored here. And so they find one of her sisters, Martha's, red shawls. They cut off a broom handle and they hang it out the window. Now, Civil War soldiers are usually very respectful of hospitals. I mean, they will go in. It's a haven for skulkers. So you're going to have Confederates who are going to go in, but if a man is truly wounded, he will usually be left alone. Because there's honor in this. They may think they're going to be the next person in this hospital, so you treat them as you want to be treated. So at any rate, they put out their hospital shawl, and they are basically safe for the remainder of the battle, taking care of wounded soldiers in their house.
Wow.